Hey, good afternoon. This is Clay with Clay's AC and Auto Repair and Clay Motion here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today we are going to remove the rear differential out of a 2007/2012-ish or 11-ish Dodge Sprinter. So it's going to work the same for your Dodge Sprinter, your Mercedes Sprinter, and your Freightliner Sprinter. They're all going to be the same rear end. We're replacing this rear end with a 4:10 gear ratio. If this video is helpful, please like, send me nice comments, most of all subscribe and share if I haven't already said that. Don't be the next to them, be the first to you, and if anybody else can do it, you can too. So here's what we got. Now this is a Dodge Sprinter, and these things are made by Mercedes, and they're designed in such a way to never come apart, and they mean it. Everything on it is designed to last the length of the vehicle. Now obviously it doesn't. This particular van has 190,000 miles on it, and this was formerly owned by the Red Cross. It was meticulously cared for. I'm a little bit surprised the rear differential's bad in it because it only has 190,000 miles on it. I have these vans that push almost 500,000 miles, and they run great. Stuff does break on it, but they're technically designed to not even have to change the freaking brake pads. It's crazy. When they do break, it's difficult to work on them. This rear end is very simple. It's straightforward, but I thought I might give you some tips and pointers on the sizes of the bolts and such. So your wheels are held on by 19 millimeters. Leave it on the ground, break the lug nuts loose first. You're going to definitely need a large pry bar to do this. You're going to want to definitely use something other than a four-way, or you'll spend all day breaking them. The lug nut studs are physically bolts, so they come out really hard. Then we're going to go into removing the brakes, and just so you guys know and you don't have to watch 10 minutes of my video, I am not going to remove the inner drum emergency brake cable. Sorry, lost my train of thought there for a second. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the rear end that I got was exceptionally removed. I mean, they didn't cut anything. That is really weird for a junkyard. And I want to throw a shout out to these guys. I think that their price was extremely fair from what I was looking at. Most rear ends for these Sprinters are $1,400, $1,500. I got this one for $1,000, so that was super nice. They put all the bolts back in it, and that was Joe's Auto Salvage in Spring Lake, Michigan. I got to tell you, I don't know if they do this stuff all the time, but that makes me extremely happy because that means I don't have to take anything apart. The only thing I have to take off is my wheel speed sensors off of my brake pad sensors off of my caliper. So big shout out to them guys. Very, very happy. And I think their price was pretty fair. They let me keep the core, so I'm going to end up trying to rebuild this core. I'll probably make a video on that for sure. Okay, so I'm not expecting anything too particular with this rear end. There really is no process that you have to go through to take the rear end out. The only thing that you got to do, the very last and the very first thing that you have to do, is take out the U-joints. But for right now, we're going to take out this lower shock, and the bolts are 18 millimeters both sides. I forgot to tell you guys, I'm using the biggest jack stands that I can, and they're rest underneath the purchase for the leaf springs. And I do plan on reusing my U-bolts. I've done it before. As long as I don't break none, it should be okay. Okay, then I take out my two 13 millimeter bolts that hold my caliper on. Prior to taking them bolts out, I will generally take a flathead screwdriver and put pressure on the cup to push it back in, so when I go to put it back together, I don't have to, take my channel locks, and that's prior to taking the bolts out. Now I'm going to take my 21 millimeter and take out my caliper bracket bolts because my new rear end doesn't have the brackets on there. You shouldn't have to heat this up. Probably the only thing that you're going to heat up is the U-bolts. You don't want to snap the ends of them off. You want to try to get them off there so you don't have to buy new ones. But I do recommend you buy new ones because these get torqued down, and they probably, they're probably weaker than they should be. So if this wasn't a service truck or something like that, I wouldn't really have too much issue with it, but because I can work on it all the time. And I've done this before, and they've went 150,000 miles, so I'm not too worried about the U-bolts. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a T55 and we're going to remove the sway bar link bolts. You just have to remove these 2 bolts on each side, and that'll pretty much remove the sway bar. You don't even have to disconnect them from up here. It might get in your way a little bit when you're going to put the rear end in, but we'll deal with that. Now, when you go to put in the drive, if you decide you want to take out the drive shaft, you might want to think about taking off your emergency brake cables first. If your rear end came like mine, if yours didn't, then you don't have to worry about it, because you're going to have to take off the rotor hat and disconnect it from inside there. Luckily, I don't have to show you that, because it's a real nightmare. I'm letting you know now. Come on. So to get the drive shaft bolts out, you're going to need an E14. You can also use a 10 millimeter, even though I recommend it, because this, or don't recommend it. It will work. I mean, a lot of these bolts in this truck are E14, and you can use 8 millimeters and 10 millimeters on a lot of the stuff in this truck. But the rear drive shaft bolts, I don't recommend it, because they tend to be a little bit tighter than most of the other stuff, and that's kind of how an E14 works. It's called an inverted Torx, if I remember right. And then we're going to use I don't remember what size it was, but we got an E8 on the pad sensor, so we're going to remove that. I didn't show us unplugging that, but that just basically just pulls right out of there. So one part of the e-brake system is relatively simple, and that's to get these balls off. I just took the spring and I twisted it over. I'm sorry I can't hold the camera and show you at the same time, but I'll do the same thing, and then I'll push that down, and then I'll pop that out of there if I could spring it back just a little bit. And you should be able to do this with 2 hands free. The next part that's going to be a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to have to figure out how to do it, is to get these out, because they're clipped on the inside, and I'm not quite certain how to get them out yet, but I want to get them out so my e-brake functions properly. And I noticed that I'm going to have to cut some of the zip ties back, because probably from right here and there to be able to slide that through that bracket. My new one has this bracket came off, but on this vehicle it doesn't come off. So I wanted to give you a view of how these e-brake cables come out. You got to push in them little clamps on the side there, and I think I got a special tool for that. I'm gonna go look in my toolbox. So I got them out. I was successful in pulling them back, and all I basically did was I put hose ring pliers on them, and I wiggled them, and then I kind of probably busted them out a little bit, but not too concerned with that. Now I'm going to cut my zip ties so I can pull them through, because this rear end's coming out, and that once that e-brake was attached and adjusted properly, it would pull that to there, so it would still work and function correctly. So now we're going to go ahead and disconnect our vent tube. It just pulls out of there. And we're going to go ahead and disconnect all our wheel speed sensors and brake pad sensors from right here. It's got little pushies on them, so we just push them out. Okay, so once you got your bolts out of your drive shaft there, you're going to give it a couple love taps and it'll come separated, or you might take a pry bar and pry it off of the yoke there. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, it's almost over, but the glamour here. So once you've gotten pretty much ready to take out your U-joints, and you got all your shocks and both sides of your brakes disconnected, you're going to go ahead and set your jack underneath the center of the yoke there, so you can lower it down. You're probably going to end up pulling it off of the jack instead of trying to drag it all the way through the back. You can do it either way. You know, if you're by yourself, you can drag it through the back. You still got to get the thing on there. That was my wife telling me she loved me, sent me a text message. I don't know if that shows up on the screen, but anyways, I love you too, babe. Basically, before we go to take these off, because like I said before in the video, I want to save my U-joints, I'm going to heat mine up. If you've got new U-joints, then you're going to just, U-bolts, I'm saying U-joints, you're just going to, you know, go ahead and zip away, and if they break, they break, no big deal for you. Like I said, I want to save mine, so I'm going to heat these nuts off, take out the 4 19 millimeters, bang, with an impact. You can use a ratcheting wrench if you want, but I prefer the impact style. So it's pretty much it, but the glamour. Okay, so I went ahead and heated up my collars on there, and I put my nuts back on for my U-bolts so I could hit them with the hammer. You don't want to hit the U-bolts without a hammer. I don't know that you needed to heat it up like I did mine, but I knew it'd make it simpler so I could drive it up a little bit. I hope that's helpful, and that's a pretty good technique right there. If you have heat, it's the best thing to use. I just wanted to point out before you guys go ahead and take out your last U-bolts for the back, make sure you're not underneath it. Try to work above it from up here or something and have your arm underneath there just in case it teeters on your drive, on your jack there. So I hope this video was helpful. Send me nice comments. I greatly appreciate them. I hope the video helps you. Let me know. Like my videos. Most of all, share and subscribe. I get paid about 0.2 of a cent for every time somebody views the video. I think it's in your best interest to watch the whole thing. If you have, then you know that. You heard that. Blah, blah, blah. I'll probably write it in the comments. Enjoy yourselves. Remember, if any other person can do it, you can do it too. Don't be the next to them. Be the first to you. God bless you and have a great day.